Thank you, Dr. Chaturvedi.
Yeah.
I think it's an extremely important topic, but given our audience, I feel it might be a bit of preaching to the choir, and most of you might agree with some of the suggestions I give. But I think it's very necessary that we update ourselves with what is going on in the NEP, how it can affect PGDM institutions, and make sure that it works towards the benefit of PGDM institutions and the larger management landscape as well. So, as you know, I think the NEP has fundamentally changed the way regulator looks at higher education in general. For the first time, we have a national education policy which came after 34 years, but that looks at expansion as its key rather than restriction. If you've looked at policies before, they prescribed what should be the maximum number of students in a course, what should be the maximum number of students in a college, but the NEP sort of flips that around. It says that any entity, higher educational entities should move towards 3,000 plus students. So it actually looks at putting a floor rather than a ceiling. And I think that's a very big change in attitude. It also, as Dr. Punya mentioned, looks at the gross enrollment ratio going from 26% at present to more than 50% in 14 years by 2035. Which means doubling the ratio, and the number of students are also growing, so almost tripling the capacity of higher education in India over the next 14 years. So it's a huge opportunity for PGDM institutions, but at the same time, it can be a double-edged sword if not implemented properly, keeping in mind the various unique aspects of PGDM institutions, of specialization, so forth, that some of the speakers before me have already talked about. So I think I want to speak about a couple of opportunities in the way regulation can change, which would be in spirit of the NEP, but look at helping PGDM institutions grow in a manner and provide and contribute towards meeting India's vision of having a 50% gross enrollment ratio in 14 years, which is a relatively short period of time. I think the largest opportunity lies in the NEP's introduction of a new concept called autonomous degree granting colleges. As most of you would know, presently the honor of granting degrees is only with universities in India or their affiliated colleges. Actually, this concept of affiliated colleges, I believe, is still a colonial hangover from Britain, whereby Britain had the system that colleges should be affiliated to universities and universities should have the exams. So when we talk about 3,000 MBA colleges in India, the large majority of them are not even, some of them are PGDM institutions, some of them are B schools within universities, but the large majority are actually none of these two. They are just affiliated colleges which are giving degrees of a university that they are not part of, but just affiliated for the sense of doing exams and giving degrees. So there is a huge drop in the sort of quality that happens. For PGDM institutions, if we are allowed to give degrees through this route of autonomous degree granting colleges, it can be a huge boon. It would bring us in par with the global nomenclature, but also allow us to give other degrees other than the MBA in terms of undergraduate degrees, multidisciplinary degrees. The NEP talks about various forms of undergrad and postgrad education. It could be 3+2, it could be 4+1. So it opens a whole gamut of things can be done as soon as we are able to give degrees rather than only diplomas. In the second aspect I want to talk about is, once you know that there is going to be a minimum floor of having 3,000 plus students at every institution, it's important to look at innovative ways to make institutions bigger. One of the ways could be to allow merger of commonly governed institutions. I know many of us, some of us on stage, run multiple institutions under the same society or the same governing board. And presently we are recognized as 4 different institutions. In our case, in many cases, 2 or 3 different institutions. So we have to go for autonomy differently, we have to go for accreditation differently, even though international accreditation bodies are actually considering some of these institutions as one. So we must talk about merging these in the eyes of the regulator and looking at some of these commonly governed institutions as one institution with a much larger number of students in the thousands, rather than looking at it as completely different institutions in the eyes of the law. I think these are the 2 major big aspects that we can look at. After that, there are certain low-hanging fruits, right? currently in PGDM institutions, there are still, maximum number of courses you can have, or maximum number of divisions you can have within a course, so people start other PGDM programs. I think these low-hanging fruits, in my interaction with the AICTE, and I must compliment them that they are quite open to hearing suggestions these days across their leadership. They'll be quite open that I think we might get rid of these restrictions. Autonomy provisions, I think today are very restrictive. The idea is that all B schools must function, even though in our institutions we have graded autonomy for 3 out of the 4 institutions. I strongly believe that from a policy perspective, autonomy should be much more expansive in nature. And also today it's very restrictive in terms of starting new courses, because all your courses or all your courses -1 should have accreditation to a certain degree for you to get autonomy. It actually restricts us in starting new courses. So new regulation in terms of having 50 or 60% of the courses being accredited to get autonomy, or having institutional accreditation rather than course-wise accreditation, might be a step in the right direction. I think it's very important to increase the time period of both accreditation and autonomy. A 3-year cycle is just way too short in terms of taking advantage of it, especially during this COVID period. We've just been, over the last 2 years, grappling with the challenges that have come in front of us, and really some of the aspects of autonomy, accreditation, some of the regulations that we could have taken advantage of, we have not been able to. So most of us are, and I would say all of us are, very long-term players in this. So that's how the government should look at increasing the timeline of accreditation and autonomy. And lastly, look at more colleges, empower more colleges to start distance learning. I think Raghav has spoken about how 33% of MBAs in the US or masters in the US are online. I think India has a lot more to be a provider of online education rather than only a consumer. So I think, I hope most of you agree with me. I feel a bit like I'm preaching to the choir once again, but we really have to work together to make sure that NEP proves to be a huge boon, which I'm sure it can be, and not a double-edged sword for PGDM institutions and management education in India alike. Thank you very much.